Welcome to One Mind Zen. Tonight's Dharma talk is given by Haengdal Citta.
In a universe of infinite possibilities and perhaps infinite siddhs, in one of these parallel streams of Dharma, a poor man approached Sid sitting on a street corner meditating and said to him, "Brother Sid, I am hungry and I am lonely, and what should I do?" And Sid looked up at him from his perfect zazen posture, his beatific expression on his face, and said, "Hunger is just a projection of body, and loneliness is just a misunderstanding of separation. You should meditate on these things and be liberated." In a separate stream of the universe, a man approached Sid meditating on a street corner and said, "Brother Sid, I am hungry and I am lonely, and what should I do?" And Sid looked up at him and broke his posture and said, "Well, I have a little bit of granola here in my bag. Why don't you sit down next to me and we can share this granola and eat and talk about what loneliness feels like and whether you are really separated by anything." So which Sid does everyone aspire to be? In the teachings of Ta Hui, and I'm going to Swampland Flowers, Don't Cling to Stillness. Once you have achieved peaceful stillness of body and mind, you must make earnest effort. Do not immediately settle down into peaceful stillness. In the teachings, this is called the deep pit of liberation. I want to repeat that because it sounds vaguely important. The deep pit of liberation. He goes on to say, "This is much to be feared. You must make yourself turn freely like a gourd floating in the water, independent and free, not subject to restraints, entering purity and impurity without being obstructed or sinking down. Only then do you have a little familiarity with the school of the Patrobe monks. If you just manage to cradle an uncrying child in your arms, what's the use?" What is the deep pit of liberation which is much to be feared among the practitioners of the way? There's this concept in the teachings of the Dhamma called a near enemy. The near enemy is not your neighbor whose dog does its business in your yard. Near enemy is that subtle bit of delusion masquerading as whatever, as stillness, as Dhamma. The near enemy is not as obvious as the great enemy. What's the great enemy? I'll quote Elie Wiesel, "The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference." There's an argument to be made either way, but it's an important argument. We learn about the perfections, so what are the poisons? Delusions, anger or hatred, clinging. So we're able to understand these. What are the opposites? Well, having hatred, being greedy, being deluded. We can make those connections. But what's the near enemy? What's the subtle, pervasive enemy? What is that which prevents us from living, experiencing, teaching, sharing the Dharma, sharing with the suffering of all mankind, all sentient beings? What is that which prevents us from living in whatever you want, the paramitas, the bojjhanga, insight factors, the immeasurables? For those who enter upon the path, most of us understand, well, yeah, hatred's probably wrong. You shouldn't hate that person. But what's the near enemy? What's the subtle thing that we face or don't face that masquerades as a paramita? When compassion is replaced with pity. In this case, when equanimity is replaced with indifference. Indifference, stillness, calmness. These are not equanimity. These are not upekkha. These are things with which we fool ourselves because look at me, I'm so calm. I'm so quiet. I'm so still. I've settled into stillness. I've settled into liberation. I am not swayed one way or the other by fate or events around me or the suffering of other beings. I'm not swayed by the cries that Avalokiteshvara hears. I walk in balance. Look at me. I'm a Dharma master. That is an enemy to be feared as much as the direct opposite. Because we fool ourselves and we do others absolutely no good when we think that being indifferent to the suffering of others, indifferent to the cries of others, indifferent to the needs of the sentient beings that we vow to save or help or whatever version of the Bodhisattva vows we espouse. If we're indifferent, if we're numb, if we're cold, if we're just spooning out some Dharma, here you go, here's a little Dharma. You're not really suffering, it's an illusion. Your pain is an illusion. Just sit down, be still, be quiet, you'll be okay. That's a near enemy. That's not equanimity. That's not balance. So what do we do in our daily lives where we fool ourselves into thinking that because we're so enlightened, so perfected, that we're living in balance when what we're living in is numbness? And so I bring this up tonight on this season, whatever anybody's individual beliefs are, coming into Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, mid-year solstice, or whatever anybody wants to celebrate. And we're coming into the season at a time when it seems like humanity is bent on undoing years of what we had all hoped was some kind of progress. And everybody is angry. And there's hatred, and there's viciousness, and there's darkness. But what's even more dangerous than all of these obvious negative emotions is those who would profess to follow the spiritual path, who would profess to follow any path in any religion based on a teaching of compassion, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity in the face of what one must do, and would replace that with a false spirituality, which is based on indifference and saying, look at me, I'm so perfected that I'm unbothered by this. The great bodhisattvas hear the cries of the world and shed tears for the world and reach out to help the world, true equanimity is not being destroyed in those efforts, but maintaining the Dharma, maintaining for us the path of the Buddha, and saying, may I help, may I save all sentient beings, not with empty words, not with promises, but with compassion, with loving kindness, with sympathetic joy, and with true balance, which is not being numb to what the world presents us with.